topic is wireless technologies we as wireless professionals need to know. Not all inclusive. We've only got a little bit of time, but hopefully we provoke some thought today, and the essence of what I want to get across hopefully comes through. I don't know what to say about me. I'm good looking, I'm present, I smell nice, and I'm the whole package. So moving on to the topic at hand, there is a lot to be aware of. And I guess maybe when I say we need to know, I'm going to say we need to know, we need to be aware, we need to have a sense, just need to live in a bigger wireless world than just Wi-Fi. Just want to plant that seed as we dig in. We'll talk about why, obviously. So, I'm challenging you with the following. You've mastered wireless. You are an 802.11 Jedi. I know a lot of us are very, very proud of what we've learned and what we can do with wireless in the form of 802.11 wireless networking. And I'm telling you, no matter what you've done in the context of 802.11, it's just not enough. Not enough to truly be successful in today's wireless world. Maybe Wi-Fi pays the bills, and I know it certainly is. It's the main thrust of my daily duties is Wi-Fi. Certainly not all I do, but I have made a living, arguably, because of Wi-Fi. But there's much more that I need to know to be successful at Wi-Fi. And the wireless world is changing quickly, much, much faster than the realm of Ethernet and stuff like that. And I'm sure, I'm not telling you things that you don't know by saying that. At the same time, it needs to be said. So I want to talk about an old problem first. And again, we're talking about other wireless technologies beyond Wi-Fi. And you don't go forward without going back a little bit, or maybe it's not back, maybe it's sideways, maybe it's a lateral problem when we talk about new technologies, but let's get to it. Doesn't matter what's out there. I'm a ham radio guy. I know some of you listening are as well. I'm a radio hobbyist. I like to look at traces, and I like to look at signals, and I like to listen to things, and sometimes I like to generate signals and like to compare different technologies. At the same time, I don't know everything that's out there. I don't think any of us do, and I apologize about the distracting number 7 up there. I'm gonna have to call management to get that removed. When it comes to wireless technologies, none of us know everything. And even in the radio hobbies, though, the fact that something is there, whether we can categorize it and tell what it is or not, the fact that something is there becomes interesting and frankly quite useful at times. I think Eric is probably salivating in the background right now to read these words. So I'm talking about things that interfere. It's one thing to be aware that we're being stepped on, and it's another thing to be able to prove it. I know that there can be some misconception about Bluetooth. It's totally harmless. Oh, it's catastrophic. And I'm only using Bluetooth as an example. We all use it, but how well do we really understand it? Different powers for different versions of Bluetooth. What's the impact of a single keyboard in a Wi-Fi environment versus perhaps 200 Bluetooth devices? Have you ever seen it so bad that you can prove that it's disrupting Wi-Fi and not just say, oh, I've got Bluetooth devices, that must be the problem because my handheld tool tells me that, or my vendor provided monitoring tool points out Bluetooth, and what do I do with that information? How do I process it? really, you need to be able to know, what is it doing? Um, Sorry about that. I had another thought and I heard a noise that distracted me. I didn't mean to advance the slide, but we'll leave it right here. So back to Bluetooth. I have seen one example. I've seen, I think it was last year in my primary employment, a Bluetooth keyboard that was bought overseas that was so heinous. It was absolutely laying waste to probably everything around it in 2.4. It was a fun one to troubleshoot with a student in a dorm setting. And basically, we removed everything, anything that was wireless, anything that was Bluetooth, shut it all down. And one by one, we brought it back. And we could prove that his situation got better with everything shut down. And boom, we plugged that keyboard in, and life got really bad. And just the notion of being able to do that sort of critical thought when we go forward and we talk about new wireless technologies. The old mindset of things can step on other things, sometimes that alone is reason to steer people to a new technology, but I don't want to get ahead. I'm just letting you know, we need to be able to take what we've learned in Wi-Fi and recognizing interference, again, using Bluetooth as an example, things that can make life tough for other things. Anymore in both 2.4 and 5 gig, you're going to find a lot of junk. And even if you can't identify it, you need to be able to identify its impact. You need to understand things like duty cycle and is what I'm seeing really bad? Or the thing that I'm seeing maybe doesn't look that bad, but it certainly could be, and why? And you might also have to be able to physically locate it, which is a lot of fun if you've never done that exercise. So my question to you, you do have a spectrum analyzer tool, right? And you understand the notion of fox hunting, tracking down a signal using various techniques to find that signal. If you have never done this, it's really a fun thing to try. And as more and more wireless technologies come out, what spectrum analyzer you have becomes important because you have to be able to detect in the frequencies where you're working, or that you're worried about. Sometimes it's just proving that nothing is there, but you got to be aware of what frequencies you're working with, and you have to know things like body fade, which is really fascinating if you want to look that up when it comes time to actually go find something that's out there that's interfering. And again, what does this all have to do with the new stuff? The old principles apply. A lot of times the new stuff is in the same frequencies, or if it becomes something that you have to do, none of what we learned in Wi-Fi becomes obsolete. You need to take these fundamental principles forward with you. And you need to recognize, even in the new frequencies, something might be interfering with something else, especially if they're unlicensed frequencies. So hopefully that was a good foundation for what we're about to talk about. And just to let you know that there's really nothing new under the sun, even though they're new technologies, supporting them, perhaps new technologies. Some of them have been out a little while, but some of them are also fast evolving and getting a bigger footprint in the market, et cetera. But the old principles and our old methodologies, they still prevail. So as we go forward, I'm telling you, we're Wi-Fi professionals, but that first bullet to me is becoming ever more important. Just because we can stick an 802.11 stack on just about anything and say that, okay, now we've got a wireless client, it's not always the best option. It's not always the best thing to do. The uninitiated or the non-experts look at Wi-Fi and say, oh, you've got wireless. Let's just put this thing there. Yeah, we can do Wi-Fi. A lot of times, and I'll just throw one out there, if you're familiar with building controls, a protocol called BACnet, BAC net. I can't imagine ever trying to put that on a large wireless network and expect it to not be anything but problematic. There are things you just don't want on Wi-Fi. Sensors that might need to be plugged into a wall outlet in a very populated area, where that outlet is within reach with a lot of hands. That's probably not a good fit. And we'll talk about some examples, but basically, again, the top bullet, sometimes Wi-Fi just isn't the way to go, even though it's appealing and it's got a siren song and it's cheap and it's there. To use it sometimes is to go down the wrong path. And to me, that's just a fact of life. A lot of people see it as, oh, well, we can just use it. It's there. Why wouldn't we? Well, the why wouldn't we is because, it's incumbent upon us to know the technical reasons of why wouldn't we. I'm telling you that to be a wireless professional, you got to live in the bigger wireless world. It's an expression I've used at least once or twice so far today, but I truly believe it. It's not enough to be just Wi-Fi savvy. You got to know about the better options. You got to know when it's time to, suggest those options. And even if you don't become an expert in some of what we're about to talk about, you have to at least be aware of them. And ideally, you would get good at some of the other stuff. But even if you're not good, you have to know what's the best, perhaps the best fit for a given situation, and at least be able to talk about it with a technical, credibility. So let's get into some specific scenarios. These are all things that I've dealt with. And again, we can't hit everything. These are really the tip of a really, really, really big iceberg, but I just want to give some real world examples. So a researcher came to me and said, well, I want to throw a whole bunch of sensors out in this townhouse complex because we're going to monitor, the smart building stuff. We're going to measure what's going on for power consumption and temperature and humidity and the overall building efficiency before and after. We're going to put this stuff out there, where a whole bunch of people live in different apartments and do a bunch of baseline measurements. And then we're going to rehab the building and then check it out afterwards to see what was gained. And oh, by the way, we're going to use Wi-Fi. Everyone has Wi-Fi. So my rhetorical question, what sounds problematic here? To me, the things that jumped out, the sensors would need wall outlets. There's not a lot of wall outlets in these apartments where they want to put sensors. Much better to put an innocuous, small device that runs on batteries for, hopefully a year or two or more. You don't have access to everybody's Wi-Fi network. You don't have everybody's Wi-Fi passwords, assuming that they're all using them, hopefully. You're not going to be able to support the system if one of your sensors goes down because, well, A, you got to get into the apartment, and B, you're going to probably have to look at their Wi-Fi to tell what's going on. It's just, the assumption is nobody is going to disturb the instrument that you're putting in, and it'll never be problematic on 10 different wireless networks. It just doesn't pass the real world smell test to me. In this case, a much better option was LoRaWAN. You could put the gateway in the common closet, get an internet connection, and because it's a low frequency, low data application, the sensors run on battery power, penetrates walls really good at the LoRaWAN frequencies, etc. And you can put in a system that you have total management control over as long as the batteries stay active. It just felt like a much better fit. And in real life, it turned out to be a much better fit. Absolutely fit the situation, does everything that the researchers were looking to do. You don't have to bother the residents of the apartments. Just everything that smelled bad about it, we were able to eliminate and give a better non-Wi-Fi solution. Had I not known about LoRaWAN, I could not have led them down that path with confidence. So there's an example of knowing about an alternative paid off. Another scenario, large public venue. I want to sell things with my wireless point of sale terminal. It's a stadium. It's your favorite artist and everybody's selling stuff, t-shirts, and I don't even know if they sell CDs anymore, but they're selling stuff, right? But have you ever tried to use the wireless in even a well-designed stadium? It can be a royal mess. Now try to do business, try to do commerce over that Wi-Fi that's being taxed by all the clients and their hotspots and all the crazy stuff the different production crews brought in, and maybe wireless intercom systems and just all kinds of junk that's in there in the unlicensed bands. You want to be able to do the sales. Even the cell network is going to get loaded down with everybody doing their selfies and their, posting shots of them at the concert, whatever. You need something better. So, we're fortunate in that we've got the new 3.5 gig band, relatively new. When I say new, it's all relative. But CBRS, the ability to do private 4G, 5G networking, a much better fit. Access a spectrum that nobody else in the place is using because of the licensing arrangement. And if you're not familiar with how it's licensed, CBRS is absolutely worth knowing about. To me, sometimes CBRS, the way it gets marketed, sometimes feels like a solution looking for a problem. But at the same time, there absolutely are use cases where it is the best solution. Another one, wireless point-to-point needed in an urban environment. I've had people approach me with, can I put these bridges up? We're in the middle of a busy city. I found these cheap bridges. I think they're going to work good. What do you think? And my first thought is, if you're trying to do bridges with either 2.4 or 5 gig in the middle of a city, you're basically going to be out of luck. You're going to have interference. Even if it works today, it might not work tonight or tomorrow. If you've never done any urban rooftop war driving, if you will, it's interesting to do because it's just utter wireless chaos. And the bigger the city and the denser the population, bigger the city from a population perspective, the density, it just makes for some really interesting and mind-blowing findings. It's just, you don't want to be using these technologies, the 802.11 base stuff or other unlicensed bridges. They may not be using 802.11, they might be doing proprietary stuff, but if they're in those frequencies, they're going to be a disappointment. But if you're aware of what else is out there, there's some pretty cool things like 60 gig for short haul bridging. Its worst enemy is weather, but if you find the right solution and you don't work beyond its length, a lot of the 60 gig stuff also has a 5 gig failover radio in it. So when weather does get bad, it's all pretty fascinating stuff. But the bottom line is, even if you don't use 60 gig, just one example, you need to be aware that there is life beyond 2.4 and 5 gig. And if you're too Wi-Fi focused in your mindset, you might not ever get there. So again, the bigger wireless worldview that I'm advocating. And, depending on where you work, where you work and who you support, this may be a frequent challenge. People wanting to do, display and audio mirroring in a classroom or an auditorium or an office. You're in the back of the room, you want to get your content to the front. Wi-Fi again tends to be a target because it's easy and hey, that's what we'll use. It's it's there and my devices do it, blah, blah, blah. Well, if your display if the content to be displayed and the audio to be played is like critical, people are using it for learning, or people are using it for um, doing business and making money and doing training and whatever. If it's anything other than recreational, you want that content to have a better chance of getting there than being at the whim of personal hotspots and goofy things that are going to interfere with Wi-Fi. WiGig, there's some interesting options there. You still want to do wireless. You don't have the luxury of wired. Look around for non-Wi-Fi stuff, and there's some fascinating WiGig options out there. They're not all that common, but if you can find a couple of options that have great reviews and that other people have used with success, and you're working within the same room, you're probably going to be a lot happier than if you try to pull this off with Wi-Fi. A lot of the Wi-Fi versions of this require the thing at the front of the room to be its own hotspot, right? And that's going to be a problem for the people that run the wireless network for the facility. Just one example of problems they might cause. So again, life beyond Wi-Fi, it does exist, and the more you can latch onto that notion, the better your Wi-Fi is going to be. You're not putting in something in this situation that's walking all over your Wi-Fi, solving one problem, creating another. And even the solving of the problem isn't going to be very effective if you did it with Wi-Fi in this case, in the typical busy classroom or office environment. So again, we don't have a tremendous amount of time, but I did want to, just give some examples. Just because it can go on Wi-Fi doesn't mean that it should. The more technologies you're aware of and that you can recommend, obviously the better. That's, kind of the overarching point here. That little gadget on the screen to the right of the slide, I have no idea what that thing is, but I love it. It comes from clickbait, and I think it's the power company doesn't want you to know about this. I can't imagine what it's supposed to be. You got USB ports, you got an Ethernet port, you got these cheesy antennas, you got screw terminals. I see a transformer sticking. I cannot imagine what that's supposed to be running maximum power mode, but I absolutely love it. So, by mastering that, you have an alternative to Wi-Fi. I just don't know what it is or where you can get one, but by golly, I like it. Cheesy, stupid looking thing. So there's lots of information out there to be had on alternative technologies, lots of methods. I'm saying to you, don't put your head in the sand. I do like that CWNP is starting to get into more of the non-Wi-Fi stuff. Right now, I'm sitting through their, CS5 or whatever, their private cellular courses. And if I have the acronym wrong, I apologize. But there's lots of information out there, both in the wild online and formal places. The things. What is the LoRaWAN? The thing. It's something. The things, and I'm drawing a blank on what it is.
The Things
I got
Network.
Yeah, thank you. The Things Network. I got most of my LoRaWAN training through them. Fascinating courses to be had there. I think they're usually free, and if not, they're low cost. Lots of places to learn about these alternative technologies if you have the time and the energy to go find them. Bottom line is, we absolutely can't put our heads in the sand as wireless people and just live through a 802.11 centric, blinders. It's just, it's not enough. And with that, hopefully we have some time for questions and discussion.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Lee. And I want to invite anybody to drop a question in the Q&A panel, and we will do our best to address it. There has been some good chat going on during this one, as always, so appreciate that. Interesting question from Andrew, who asks if we have any experience with Cisco ultra reliable wireless backhaul. He says we're thinking of implementing that to connect a couple buildings in a close campus without running fiber. Yeah, have you checked that out, Lee? I have some thoughts on it too.
I have not seen anything from Cisco. I know as asked in my ignorance, it sounds like the new Airvine stuff, the speeds of fiber without running fiber kind of
Yeah,
promises. I don't have firsthand experience. Um, what I have seen of it, I just know that having looked at specs and all of that, I found myself skeptical, but I'd love to hear that it's working for somebody. But what do you
yeah,
got, Jen?
yeah. I don't have any firsthand experience with it either. I just kind of became aware of it when they released one of their industrial wireless APs with 6 gigahertz earlier this year that also supported this mode. And it does use the same Wi-Fi radios when it's using their proprietary protocol, URWB. So I suspect what they're doing is kind of a modified 802.11 where they make the channel access really, really aggressive, where it'll just transmit over almost anything. And maybe they've modified the retry method or something like that. So packet loss is minimized. But I think it lives in our three now primary Wi-Fi bands, 2.45 and 6 gigahertz. So probably subject to some of the issues Lee talked about in dense urban areas. But want to invite anybody in the chat that's had a look at that to see what it thinks. That one of the things that made me raise an eyebrow is that these, at least one of the APs is 4 spatial streams, and that's where they get the 7.8 gigabits per second throughput number. And I think it's going to be a challenge to get 4 spatial streams working and then outdoor point-to-point link. But interesting technology.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just another example of the stuff that's coming out, and it kind of slides in. And if you have a reason to look at it, you're going to know about it. And sooner or later, you'll have a reason to at least become aware of it. And, when that opportunity comes, even if it's something you'll never use, it's good to know. It's good to read it and, read it over and know why you might consider it or what about it doesn't sit well with you. So if it comes up, in another conversation or somebody comes in and challenges you as the wireless expert, hey, should we use this? It's a lot more comfortable to be ahead of it and at least know of that which is being asked of you than to have to scramble. Like on that one, I would have to scramble to come up with am I comfortable with the thought of this or not and why? So that one just made it to my list.
Yeah, and the people in the chat are letting me know this came from the Fluid Mesh acquisition. So if that rings any bells with anybody, that's where this technology came from. So, and Martin says it worked fine in Prague, so maybe they got to see it at WLPC in Prague, if you were lucky enough to be there last week.
Cool.
Question from Forrest. He wants to know if there's a cert available in LoRaWAN.
Well, cert means different things. I have a printed out cert somewhere. I think I have 2 of them from the Things Network. There's a certificate of completion. I did the course. For what that's worth. It's not a numbered, verifiable CWNP, level cert, but at the same time, LoRaWAN is part of the CWIS. Is that right? CWNP CWIS, whatever the heck. the IoT track, LoRaWAN is part of that. So, you go through and you get your IoT certifications through CWNP, and you will learn about LoRaWAN, but it's not a LoRaWAN cert per se. Still worth at least, there's parts of that curriculum I'm not really jazzed about, but overall it was worth doing. I can say that too firsthand. And the Things Network, if you're just interested in focus on LoRaWAN, you will get recognized that you finished it, and you do have to answer some questions and all of that. But whether that is a cert in the context that the person is asking about or not, up for debate, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I've done those LoRaWAN certs from the Things Network too, and um, it's definitely good for getting started. I think learning the basics. Question from Joe: how do you handle rogue APs? I don't do much with them since we don't have control over them. Does anyone pay attention to the alerts, and what do you do with them? Interesting question, I think, in this context, because a rogue AP and Wi-Fi and another network operator using a different wireless protocol, those things probably need to be conceptualized a little differently, right? So
Yeah, it's a
typically,
very interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, if something pops up on your LAN environment or something, you get wind of something in the air somehow. Well, so let me curtail that for a minute. 802.11 rogues, somebody puts in a router, whatever, hopefully you have policy that is enforceable to track down the router and, this isn't allowed and here's why, that's got to go. That's an easy one. Personal hotspots, Wi-Fi hotspots. Well, you can't tell them no if you listen to the FCC, but you can certainly point out that, trying to run a class and there's 15 personal hotspots in the auditorium. That's why your wireless kind of sucks. Can you ask people not to do that? Have that discussion with the faculty and the academic department. That's another way. It's a non-technical way to deal with the problem. And if people pop up something exotic that's in your network, anything that goes on your LAN, you certainly can, mitigate as far as you can't do that. It's our LAN and we control it. As far as the, other methods of dealing with something, well, you generally can't jam stuff. A lot of times the answer is non-technical. Get that out of here, and if you won't, get you and that out of here. It's just not allowed, and this is our environment, kind of thing. At least in private environments. When you're out in the public, a lot of this gets a heck of a lot murkier, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do. It's a very thorny question with a lot of dimensions and a lot of nuance. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Jim.
quick comment from Keith in the chat. He says he knows that Keith has wanted, or that Lee has wanted to jam people in the past.
I don't know if I've wanted to jam people in the past. Maybe that's, I know when the FCC came out with their ruling about the Marriott, and I know this is a big topic, and I'll try to be very brief. Years ago, the Marriott was jamming people's hotspots to force them to pay to use a guest network. There's that, which is just like, sleazy and devious and profit driven kind of thing. Where I have questioned the FCC's ruling is that they spell out, they put it in print, things like they named the type of venue specifically where you can't use mitigation techniques. They
Yeah.
still allow the vendors to sell mitigation techniques, which are jammers. So the things that they're not saying are disturbing. And I haven't so much advocated for being able to jam. It's just like it to me, there's almost like an implied, well, it's okay to do in your own private network. The way we've written our decision, it's okay to do in your own private network as long as you're not doing it to make people spend money. You give them another way to connect, and you're not in one of these named venues. And I don't believe I have it right. I just
Yeah.
believe that their rulings were so um, partial and incomplete and stupid and quirky and subject to interpretation that it's hard to know what the hell they really meant and didn't mean, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And it's not, again, I'm not advocating, I wanted to jam, but at the same time, the FCC is allowed so much to become wireless, and then to say, and you're not allowed to protect voice over IP and this and that. You have to live with any goofy thing somebody might want to do in your environment. There's just so many elements of where we are and what they have said and haven't said that none of it really squares, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I've read a lot of the FCC stuff, and I think my takeaway is just to be aware of any network engineer that tells you with very high confidence what you can and cannot do with containment, because it's very unclear. There's a lot of uncertainty. I think it's legally an open question in the US. And by the way, it's going to be different in every other country. But I would proceed with extreme caution before using that in Wi-Fi. Plus, like Lee mentioned, there's much more straightforward mitigation techniques, right? Shut down the switch port that AP is connected to. Go find it and say, hey, you're causing interference. Can you please turn that off? Most people will oblige you. So
Yeah, so much of what we try to do is, throw a technical solution at a behavioral problem. And sometimes you can, and sometimes it's the worst thing you can do. A lot of times it's still human to human conversation will go a lot further and be a lot less expensive than, trying to use technology to fix everything.
for sure. All right. Well, I think Heather, we're probably right at time for Q&A, and if you're there to emerge from the shadows, maybe we can transition. There she is.
I'm following Eric's lead, and it's fun to drum up some suspense. Speaking of suspense, Eric, are you with us? Oh, there he is. Woo!
How you doing? Yes, getting a little spooky. Yeah,
Awesome.
I got to admit, Lee, you were talking about Spectrum, and I was certainly salivating, but you know what? I'm ready to go. I've licked my chops, wiped my face, and now I'm ready to go. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate it very much. All right, if it's time, then I think, let's just get into it. It's time for 7 minutes with 7 Signal, where we take a little feature inside 7 Signal, we unpack it and show you how it can have awesome value. And today, indeed, we're going to show you a little bit about Spectrum. Let me share my screen. And if you can see that, give me the thumbs up. All right. So here's the thing. Lee was talking about some really cool stuff with regards to, hey, should we just use Wi-Fi? Why not use Wi-Fi? It's free. And, maybe you get some pushback. Well, wait a minute here. I don't want to use Wi-Fi for reasons 1, 2, and 3, X, Y, and Z. And maybe you're getting into an argument. Wouldn't it be nice if you can actually show somebody what was going on in the spectrum in order to inform your decision? Wouldn't it be nice to have a little evidence, a little bit of proof? Sometimes we got to play a little bit of defense when we're wireless guys, right? When we have the information right there in front of us, we can use it in order to make an intelligent decision. The cool thing about putting a Sapphire Eye in a location is that it's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, performing an analysis. Walking around into this building or walking around in that building with some kind of a tool. You don't need to do that. And we also know how hard it sometimes can be to catch interference in the act. So by recording it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we can actually see what the pattern is. So here we go, guys. We're inside the Spectrum Analyzer portion of Sapphire, and I've got both line graph and waterfall selected. So if somebody were to say, hey, we want to heavily use Bluetooth in this area, I would say, you know what? Okay, well, we're using Wi-Fi in this area very successfully. And so I don't know if I want you interfering with that. Okay, this is what a good Wi-Fi environment, a good healthy Wi-Fi environment would look like. You can see channels 1, 6, and 11, the nice rise, the energy and the fall. This looks really good. Okay, so I might say, hey, we're depending upon good Wi-Fi in this area on the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. I don't want you touching it. Okay, and let's go down here. You can see here on the waterfall chart, as we waterfall from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, that I can see the nice 3 pillars of 1, 6, and 11 looking nice and clean. I don't want you to touch it. Okay, and then down here on 5 gigahertz, another thing. I can say to myself, when looking at the spectrum in this area where you want to use a certain technology or you want to set up some kind of special arrangement, I might say, you know what, that's fine, but based upon what I see here, I want you to stay away from certain channels that in my environment are pretty relied upon and pretty hot to trot. If you could do me a favor, maybe use channel 128 or maybe use channel 40. Something like that, something that you're not really using very much. You can't make that recommendation unless you can see it right in front of you, and that's my point. All right, let's take a look at another situation. So this is one area. This is the second floor here. Let's look at maybe the second floor of this building up here. So this is another building. Somebody comes along and they say, hey, I want to use Bluetooth. You know, and you say to yourself, well, okay, well, let's take a look at the spectrum and see what's going on. Okay, and I would take a look at this. Let's go back up to the top, and I look at this and I'm like, whoa, look at that signature. So when I look at that energy signature, I say to myself, you know what? There's a lot of Bluetooth in there. I would say that there's not any Wi-Fi going on, and there's a lot of Bluetooth going on. And I can scroll down here, you know, because that's like that sawtooth, you know, channel hopping pattern that I'm accustomed to seeing, right? So let's take a look here. Here you can see the Bluetooth kind of signature in the background, can't you? And you can see the BLE kind of spike emitting here, kind of indicating that there's some Bluetooth in effect. And there you go. You can see it kind of streaking across, and you can see the activity up and down. And again, you know, this is a place where I wouldn't want to put Wi-Fi because it is so intense with regards to Bluetooth, but maybe additional Bluetooth would be just fine because they can all play nicely together. Again, without the information, it's difficult to know what to do. And that's why we use 7 Signal. It gives us the information and it tells us how to then plan accordingly. So that's what I had for you guys today. I hope that you were able to learn a little bit of something new. Lee, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. And I just want to take a moment to remind everybody out there that while you and me, we can't see or hear Wi-Fi, but 7 Signal can.